near-death experiences.
Oh.
What is that? What conjures up in your mind when you hear that? Are you going to switch off and run away? No, don't do that. Wait a minute. Or do you think of people like in the movies where you have one person staring at themselves from above their bodies? Or are you thinking of ghosts? Or what do you think about when you hear near-death experiences? And this has become quite mainstream right now. If you look even on YouTube, there's a whole lot of people that have had near-death experiences. But what exactly is that? Today, I've got a beautiful guest, Tom Kelly, who's experienced it. Excuse the pun, Tom. And we're going to have this wonderful conversation about this because it's something that is so interesting. And how does it change your life if it happens? Do you see God? Do you see heaven? What is it really all about? My name's Carina, and this is Break Fear, Find Freedom. And for now, hello, Tom. How are you today?
I'm terrific. Thanks, Carina. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Tom. Thank you. Okay, tell us about near-death experience. I know or NDEs, how it's called in the lingo or whatever it is, but tell me a bit about your experience. And did you see God?
Funny you should ask that. Funny you should say about what it's called in the lingo. You're reading my mind there a bit, because I think it's an utter misnomer, near death. It's like being a little bit dead, being a little bit pregnant. I think it's absolute nonsense. I think it is death. Right. I think it's absolute death for those people, and that they come back and this is their afterlife. And I'm amazed that I might be the first one to say that. I'm thinking, like Thomas Sassy thought, everyone's going to realize what I realized, that so-called mental illness is just human suffering, and he was bursting to get his myth of mental illness out there before everyone else did. And 20, 30 years later, he couldn't believe this. People still hadn't got it, But these near deaths, I think they've always happened, and I think they've what informed the Western view of what nirvana, heaven, is like. But it could still be that when we die, it's complete lights out, and that's all. It could be that this is just stuff conjured up by the brain, which is all the evidence is against that, partly because people come back with such amazing information about the future, and that's provable. More and more of it is verifiable now, I think. Not just that they were sitting perched up in the operating theatre and saw things that they shouldn't have been able to see or hear when they were flatlining, but they tell stuff about the future, and there's so many thousands of them now. I think the evidence is overwhelming if you look for them. But the misnomer, I think, is that if you die and you come back, this is your afterlife, and this is my afterlife, I think. Was the question there? There was?
Yes. So, yes, that would make sense, because, I mean, if you have a near-death experience, you aren't going to die and come back. So it is a misnomer, like so many other things, but that's a whole discussion for another day. Yes, what I wanted to know is, did you see God?
I will get to that. You did ask that. I love all of the lectures I've heard, not just by your guest Howard Schubiner, which I'm so looking forward to seeing shortly, but by Ken Robinson, the English educator who died at 70, I think, of cancer a few years ago, and who gave most amazing 2 TED Talks and a whole lot of other TED Talks, during many of which he refers to so-called ADHD, by the way. But in the first one, which is renamed Do Schools Kill Creativity, I think, he mentions the story of a little girl in elementary school who never paid much attention to any lesson. But during art class one day, her head was down, and she was, do you know this TED Talk, Carina? Have you seen it?
No.
Her head's down, and she's totally engrossed, engaged, absolutely filled with passionate enthusiasm about what she's doing. And the teacher comes down and looks over her shoulder and says, what are you drawing or painting? And she says, I'm drawing God. And the teacher, of course, says, but no one knows what God looks like. And the kid says, they will soon, or they will now, And the funny thing is, Ken laughs that off, but, well, what did God look like? It didn't even occur to Ken Robinson in all his incredible enlightenment. And you see a wonderful talk between him and Eckhart Tolle, by the way, on YouTube, Ken Robinson. It didn't occur to Ken Robinson that what the child painted or drew could have been incredibly fascinating for us. So he dismissed it, as did the teacher, as do we all. Child just thought.
Always. It's just a child.
And the child probably did see God. What the heck did she paint? I would love to know. So when I was preaching once to my little 9-year-old daughter about the reason God put us on this planet, I said, why did God put us here? And she said, to make other people, she said. And I said, I said, he or she, is it he or she? And she said, what? I said, Catherine, when you saw God in the sky that day at school a couple of years ago, when she was about 7 or 6, was it a man or a woman? And she said, it's a whole bunch of people, she said. When she was looking up at the sky, and I said, what is it, honey? She said, I see God. And I looked up, and the clouds didn't look like any guy with a beard to me, you know, I couldn't see anything. So here, 2 years later, I say, what did it look like? It's a whole bunch of people. So I don't know what she saw, and I must ask her again, but I'm not sure if she still remembers that. So God doesn't, I guess God looks like a whole bunch of people. I think it looks just like Carina and to me and everyone, every insect and every camel bug. And I think nothing we see is not God. How could it possibly be? All of creation is an expression of God. It's the face of God. There's a beautiful poem by Joseph Mary Plunkett, one of the guys executed in 1916 in Ireland. I see his blood in every rose, in every whatever it is. A mystic, he saw God in all things, everywhere, all the time.
Yes.
The young Thomas Aquinas said, what is God when he was 5? What is not God? You know, everything and more, more, and more. So I didn't see God at all. No. I close it. I see, you know what you see when you close your eyes really, really, really tightly? Usually. You see stars kind of, don't you? That's what I saw.
Yes, yes. Well, I wanted to ask that, but I agree with you that wherever you are, God is, right? So he's everywhere, or it, or they, for the want of a better word. But I just wanted to just see how you'd come up with that, obviously. But did you see lights, or what exactly happened, and how did you know?
I absolutely, totally, completely, and utterly did not know. And about a year and a half later, a veterinarian in Ireland sent me an account of what he called his near-death experience. And he said he'd been taken up above the tapestry, and he saw that from below it's just stupid threads, random threads. But from above, he could see the beautiful meaning and glory of it all. And in his humility, he said, why me? And he was told kind of, why not? And all kinds of chronic problems he had cleared up when he came back from that. And he saw, he was impressed with the glory of God. I think he writes a beautiful paragraph. I'd love to send it to you. And when he wrote this thing to me, I thought, oh. And he said it was a near-death experience. He didn't tell me what danger he was in or whether he was in hospital, and never found out. Mysteriously never found out. But when he described this, I thought, oh, that's a bit like what happened to me. Maybe what happened to me were near-death experiences. All I knew, when people give their accounts on YouTube, they often deal with the worldly stuff leading up to them, which is incredibly important for them, obviously. And it is for me too, but it's pretty boring for other people. So having put off a nap a few evenings, I went for a nap one evening. I did go for a nap. I gave in. And I can't remember whether my phone alarm went off or whether I woke up spontaneously about 8:30 on a May evening, 16th of May, 2008 in Ireland. And when I woke up from the nap, and for weeks and weeks afterwards, when I'd wake up in the morning, I'd say, did I dream it or was it real? And I knew it's real. When I woke up from the nap, I suddenly found myself lying either face down or back. My eyes, I don't know, Carina, if you've ever done, I've never heard of this meditation where you just, people say relax progressively, but if you just close your eyes and let your lids relax, and then you think they're relaxed, and then, you can relax them more and more and progressively more. You know, it's amazing how there's still some tension there unless, it was exactly the opposite with me. It wasn't I who tightened those, something made my eyes tighten, tighter and tighter and tighter, the lids. And just, I could feel the whole of my top half of my face being thrown into this complete convulsion, but it was painless. And the bottom of my house seemed to be unaffected. And streams of tears began to pour, and I began, oh my goodness, the bed is going to be soaking wet with all these tears. But as this happened, I didn't know what peace was. I had no idea. I thought peace was just boredom. You know, teachers say peace. I thought peace was just boredom and lack of noise. As this happened, it was like in moments, any experience of complete relief that any human being had ever tasted or wished for. All that relief was like compressed into the first couple of moments. Just. So, and at that stage, I used to joke that I suffered from 49 years of postnatal depression, you know, And most of the 49 years, I really wished I'd never, ever been born. My life, I didn't have much tolerance. I was completely overprivileged and spoiled, and I lived in tremendous luxury and had everything the world could offer, really. But I was absolutely miserable, and I wished I'd never been born because I had no idea how to use any of that stuff. I was just miserable, like a spoiled brat. So most days I'd have said, yeah, I wish I'd never been born if I'd had the choice. But I was 49 and a bit then, and when this happened, it was like complete payback in moments for that. And it was like the immediate, I'm good now. Thanks. Okay, I'm good. I'm paid, and I've got a big Ford van stop. This is getting embarrassing in the first moments, but continued, So when people say, how could a loving God allow the trains chug into Auschwitz and all this incredible pain, or what's going on in Gaza, these children and these innocents, and how could a good God allow that suffering? Well, the simple answer is, if a God could, in a nanosecond, repay any amount of human suffering, years of suffering, an infinitely powerful God could do that. And I believe that's why we sign up for this, because we know what the contract is. We're not stupid, and we're not that nice. But in that first experience, the whole thing may have lasted, 60 or 90 seconds maybe. I stopped worrying about the tears. I stopped worrying about everything. And I think Woody Allen said, he said eternity is a long time, especially at the beginning. I think he said something like that. And he also said that if ever he had a near-death experience, his life was so boring that someone else's life would flash before him, I think he said. It was as though my life was so boring that everyone else's life just flashed before me in an instant. Mine didn't take long. And in less than an instant, I realized that anything I'd done that I would not have been proud of, that I would not like to see published in the papers, that was always simply when fear overwhelmed me and got the better of my judgment. And I thought, oh, wow. And I realized that goes for absolutely every other human being equally. And we judge and we judge. We're meant to judge, but we don't need to blame. Because when fear gets too much for us, every single one of us will succumb. When temptation gets too much, we'll succumb. Joan of Arc, probably the bravest human being we are aware of ever, braver than Jesus, or maybe braver than Reverend Wade Watts. I don't know. She said that if you stretch me on a rack, I will recant, because I will scream and I will admit to anything if you stretch me and torture me enough. But if you take me off that rack again, I will take it back, she said. And when she said that, they said, "Oh, just burn the bitch." Excuse my language. So they burned her. Basically, I think that's what happened for cross-dressing, theoretically, for being a heretic and for having visions and for being pure and holier than any of the bishops in the Inquisition, obviously. So where was I? Did I see God? Yeah, I saw stars, like if you were experiencing the Big Bang, and that's what it felt like. My belief was that there was a Big Bang and that everything was expanding from there. And in the first moments, it was as though I was experiencing the entire Big Bang and seeing that it was all good and everything was in divine right order, including my, excuse my language, shitty little life, that it was all exactly as it was meant to be and that it was glorious like everybody else's. That was the first moment, kind of. And in the next moment, when they say we don't use 10% of our brains, you listen to anyone's near-death experience and they experience kind of everything in a flash through their brain, perhaps, or maybe the brain, who knows. But what our awareness can take in, I mean, what we're going to express in a moment is something, but what our awareness can take in is so much, infinitely more than a brain could begin to guess at. So many people say it was indescribable bliss. I agree, you can't describe it, but you can narrate it, I think. So if the first moments were everyone's relief, every soul that ever lived, their relief compressed into nanoseconds maybe, the second moment was like any joy, triumph, glory, jubilation, celebration that anyone ever had was compressed, that any soul had was into the next moment and added to that. The next moment was like any sorrow was transmuted to joy and multiplied by those previous moments. And then after that, it was like any, I don't mind saying it, orgasm anyone had ever had or dreamed of having was compressed in another moment, and everything before that was to the power of that. And then after that, it got much, much better, much, much faster. And here I am sitting on kind of, it was like a total communion of all souls, a complete understanding of everything that everyone else had done, and a celebration of you did that and I did that. In an instant, we realized completely what the other one had done. So the total union of all souls. And then you're sitting there in this bliss, and it's still accelerating faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And someone says, would you like to stay here? And say, hang on, I've absolutely nothing left to offer here. So, well, you can hang on anyway, but I've nothing. I'm rowing. I've nothing to offer. Please. And I said, oh, whatever you like. Do you want to go? Please let me go back and get something to bring to the party. I haven't. Other people say they didn't want to go back, or they did want to go back. But the biggest thing in that first one was, if I need to go back and tell everybody about this. I really need to tell everybody. I had 49 years not knowing this, living a shitty, horrible, miserable, frustrating, meaningless life, and everyone else I presumed had similar lives, which they haven't apparently, because they did not want to know when I went back. I need to go back and tell them, especially my family. I said, well, if you're sure you want to, yeah, if I do go back, I'll remember all this. Oh, yeah, you remember it all. And I said, yeah, well, I definitely want to go back. And I said, okay. And I could hear some voice behind me afterwards probably saying, good luck with that, probably. But I didn't hear it at the time. And so back I went. But moments later, the thing repeated. And in the repeat session, it was almost exactly the same. But there were two words. And the words were, I hate to admit, Everything Belongs, which is the name of a book by Richard Rohr, a Franciscan. Great writer, but otherwise my experience was entirely secular, you could say. But everything belongs, is that everything is in exactly where it's meant to be always, So that was the first two. So I didn't see God, but the loving presence, the infinitely loving presence through which I saw my silly little life and was congratulated for it. That presence was, I guess, God, or every creature, every intelligence that had ever breathed or been aware of anything. A whole bunch of people, as my daughter said, and more. An infinitely wise, loving, intelligent, there was nothing to forgive kind of presence. It was a bit like, I suppose, those cameras that the cops carry. It was as though that I had been carrying all my life, and that that film was played back in an instant for me to see myself, and the only judge was absolutely me. Nobody was saying, I was saying, oh well, cool. The only judge was myself. And I have no doubt it's the same for Adolf Hitler or anybody else. Could have done that a bit better, whatever. But fear, yeah, thanks. The fear was my gift to me. The fear made me do that ignoble stuff. And I'm okay with that. And I have to be okay with what everyone else did too.
Wow, that's beautiful, Rick. And I'm thinking, how did that change you after that? Did it change you as a person? I mean, did you change your life? Did Tom Kelly become a different person? Or were you a different person for a bit and then continued with the same life?
A person is a kind of misnomer too, isn't it? The persona.
Yes, I know.
Right. The mask that Jung talked about, the per is through and sona is sound. The mask had a hole in the mouth so you could speak your sound through, I think, yeah. So persona, personality, person, as though I spent 1985 in Australia thinking that the sun would cure me of my postnatal depression, which it didn't. But while I was there, one funny thing happened. News got through to me that some psychiatrists had agreed that the personality wasn't a thing after all. Or if it was a thing, it was a thing that nobody could agree on. I thought, woohoo, progress. It sounded right. Eckhart Tolle talks about sub-personalities. Carl Jung says that, you become a doctor and society expects you to behave a certain way, and you may automatically behave a certain dignified way. People expect the doctor to be very dignified and thoughtful and unflappable, and the clergyman and so on. We play these roles, and we may fall for them ourselves very much, and we may come home and still play the role, and the family may say, what's up with you, But we may hang on to it. I'm the father, and I'm never wrong. Whatever, all these different roles. And some of these, Jung called them personas, that we may fall for them ourselves, or we may take them off. But if we take those away, and of course, sometimes Jung says some of these sub-personalities know the other ones and some don't. A might not know B, but B could know A, in which case Jung would say B is more like the real one, the ego, as he called it. Tolle, as you know, calls the ego the unobserved mind, that whether it's conscious or unconscious, the stuff and that free will kicks in when we realize that the conditioned mind is running our lives, and we suddenly say, wow, that's just my conditioning. And then finally, when you can step out of your conditioning and out of all your personalities or sub-personalities and just be your fearless, loving awareness, then you can begin to exercise perhaps some kind of free will, perhaps, maybe, until fear comes along and takes you over again, of course. But that fear thing is it us, or is it from previous generations or from our race? I'm not sure. And is it Satan, by the way? But whatever it is, at least the main thing is it's an arrow that we can learn to recognize. We can say, there is some fear here, there is some resistance here. And I guess that was the lesson of the 3 experiences I had, at the third one the next morning. That when you take away absolutely all fear, anxiety, negativity, and you remain wide awake, then you become this supremely intelligent being, which I can't even imagine now. Beyond humor, beyond love, beyond just infinite intelligence, I suppose, when all human resistance and fear and negativity and conditioning is removed. But what encourages me, I think, is that Tolle says that while his first experience with that, he was thrust into this vortex, that after that he's voluntarily, deliberately, knowingly gone into even deeper states of bliss when he wanted to. So I guess that's there for all of us to access when we want and learn to.
Yes. So that's a fun question, but I need to just go back. So hold that thought, but I want to go back to something else you said. Persona, yes, we've got all personas, but don't we? I mean, something like that would make you realize, become aware of certain things. But obviously, as you go through life with different experiences, it changes you anyway, right? So something like that would probably give you a boost. The words here are sometimes difficult to explain. So sometimes there's no words to explain what I'm trying to say. So I hope you can. So sometimes an experience like that will give you a boost to a higher level of awareness, for the want of a better word. Whereas if you hadn't experienced it, it would have taken you longer to get to that level of awareness. So the trajectory of your life would have been different somewhat. And I don't know if that really makes any difference right now. But what I'm talking about is almost parallel realities or different timelines. And does that even make any difference, or does that even have an impact of what our conversation right now? I don't know why that came up, but I have to. The things that come up need to be discussed when they come up.
A lot of people, spiritual awakening, we're kind of speaking of, but if anything is spirit, everything is spirit. And if any human experience is about spiritual awakening, every single human experience from when we were primates and when we were amoebas and when we were primordial slime has been leading towards our spiritual awakening. I think that the leap where we suddenly leap to consciousness, that we are the consciousness itself, that ephemeral thing for which you have no words, that everything has been leading up to that. So a lot of people nowadays, when they have these near-death experiences, usually when they flatline, they drown or they get a heart attack, it seems, I'm guessing, that some vesicles somewhere, some cells release a huge lump of, a bolus of DMT into their system, I suspect. And I think that's a bit like coming to puberty, releasing your first egg, having your first wet dream. I think some people's spiritual awakenings are gradual, but a lot of people have this suddenly, aha. And I think in my case, I wasn't in the slightest physical danger when my near-death experiences happened, which is I just gone for a nap. And so I called them mystical experiences at the time, and I hadn't really heard of near-death experiences. And I assumed that my mom was about to die, and I had been given a taste of the paradise that she was heading to. That's how I interpreted it. And I told my family that, and they thought I was nuts. So looking back, why, if it were a physical thing of 2 releases of DMT and a third the next morning, that's physiologically, that's a little bit hard to explain, mind you. But effectively, with me, it was as though there were these 2 short bursts of this transport that night, and then a third one the next morning. And so many things had been leading up to that, including meeting an Irish healer 2 days before. I think he was the immediate trigger. Just 2 days before, I'd met this guy who apparently had healed a colleague of fibromyalgia. And I was a very, very, very much materialist scientist or veterinarian. I did not really. I had been reading a bit of Eckhart Tolle, but I didn't really believe there was anything else out there. And when I met this guy, I chatted him for about 10 minutes. I wanted to pay him a bill for somebody else, which he accepted, I think. And at the end of our 10-minute chat, I was interviewing him like a journalist as far as I was concerned. At the end of the 10 minutes, I said to him, Eamon, if this guy, Jesus of Nazareth, if he ever even lived, you don't actually honestly believe he was physically resurrected, do you? On the third day? And he kind of smiled at me and he said, nothing is impossible to God, creator of all that is and of all that is not. And when he said of all that is not, there was a kind of a click of that. I often wondered at the edge of space, whatever the Big Bang is expanding into, there can't be a vacuum because that would be more space. And there can't be a red brick wall saying end of space here. What is there? You know, that had boggled my mind. And here was the answer, creator of all that is and of all that is. And sure enough, on the third day after my meeting him, this thing happened to me. So I met him on Wednesday the 14th of May, and this happened on Friday, the evening of Friday the 16th. But I had also been corresponding with my future wife, Kelly, and she'd been telling me a bit about Celtic mysticism. And I think that had been working on my subconscious mind, that the Celts, the Irish, long before Christianity, the Druids had this secret knowledge. They knew we were indestructible, immortal souls, and that knowledge never leaves the Irish, I think, no matter what Vatican or London tells them. We know we're immortal. And we Irish are now, I don't know about you South Africans, we're definitely immortal. And so a lot of that had been working on me, I think. And I'd also heard this extraordinary Irish mystic, John Moriarty, interviewed on radio. And John was dying of prostate cancer. And he told Joe Duffy on Irish radio, he said, Joe, the way I look at it, Joe, it's like I'm in Dublin Airport, Joe, but I'm not in the terminal building, Joe. I'm in the departure lounge, Joe. And when he spoke, you could feel something go up and down my spine, and I thought, this guy is different, you know. So a whole lot of things have been leading up to it. Kapow. And yeah, go ahead.
I love it. So I can just say it's almost like it was a manifestation. Or again, I shouldn't even use that word, because but it's almost like how God, or all that is probably a better way to describe whatever it is, you know, God, the universe, all that is, listens to everything we say all the time. So be careful what you wish for. And that's such a prime example of that's exactly, it's almost like you wished for it on an unconscious level. I mean, that's what I'm seeing here. No, on an unconscious level, you questioned it and you wished for it, and there it was. And then again, it shows the interconnectedness of beings, right? Of us, and how all that is, or God is all around us all the time in everything that we do and say. And again, then we'll say, like, maybe all we have is this precious moment.
You said be careful what you wish for. You didn't really mean that, did you? I mean, don't be careful. You don't wish. It's not what, that's what you're
wish. Well, yes, wish. But what I'm saying is that a lot of times people have like, and you know, remember, whatever you wish for comes back to you 10 times over. So that's what I'm saying. Be careful what you wish for. So you know, wish for good things rather, and for positive things rather than, well, bad things. And maybe that's my limiting belief as well.
But we all do. I mean, we are deep down, we may get carried away and enjoy anger and negativity and triumph and nastiness, but deep down, our hearts are all seeking peace and joy. That's how we're made. And in our little particular, whatever human incarnation we have, we know that our way to joy at any little crossroads, we instinctively know this. We're always intuitive. A man's character is his fate. We know. And there are no wrong. Yogi Berra knew. He said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. Whichever one you take, you were always going to take. Yes. There are no wrong paths. And the more careful, if you're being careful and cautious and stupid, you're just not enjoying the trip. Just have no care. I mean, you're going to get there anyway. And as long as you think you can do wrong, you're not going to enjoy the trip. When you realize you couldn't do wrong if you tried, you say, what? No, you could not do wrong if you tried. Really? But can I try a little bit to find? Try all you like, but you're going to realize you could not do wrong if you tried eventually. Everyone comes like, What was I so worried about? Would it spoil some vast eternal plan if I robbed the bank? Let's see, I'll rob the bank and get 40 years in prison. Oh yeah, whatever. But eventually, presumably we must come back again and again and again, because some people have such rotten lives. But eventually we realize I couldn't shake some or ruin or spoil some vast eternal divine plan. I'm not powerful enough to change God's plan. I am God. So why would I even try to do wrong? Why would I even try when I know I can't?
Yes.
It takes. Yes. So when people often say, "Take care, man," I said, "Be careful." They say, "Yeah, but not too careful." Careful, safety.
But that's again, it's also a state of mind, right? So you'll have people that live in safe neighborhoods but are always afraid. And other people will walk around in the street knowing that they're safe and nothing happens to at night, and knowing that they're safe and nothing happens to them. And the people that are constantly afraid of being robbed are robbed. So again, is be careful what you fear. You get what you fear, right?
And the way out of that, stay with that though. When you're afraid of being robbed, you think, if I'm robbed, my life is going to be unlivable. I can't deal with that. But as soon as you look it bravely in the face and say, no, I'll look at it later. But eventually you do look the dragon in the face, like in How to Train Your Dragon. Eventually you have to, because eventually, like in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, I don't know if you've seen that movie, they're on the cliff face. The guys with the guns are up here. The water's down there. He says, let's jump. He said, no, let's shoot it out. Robert Redford says to Paul Newman. He says, no, let's jump. He said, no, let's shoot it out. He said, why not jump? He said, let's shoot. Why not? He said, because I can't swim. He says, what, you can't swim? The fall's going to kill you. I mean, we're all eventually pushed into that ledge where we have to find our courage anyway. It's like some famous Anais Nin or somebody said, it takes more agony for the rose to stay a bud than to open. Eventually, we're just forced to open. We're dragged screaming out of Plato's or Socrates' cave. We are dragged out anyway. And eventually we see, let go or be dragged. Eventually we see it's going to happen anyway. So we jump off the cliff. We find courage we never knew we had because we're faced with which is the lesser of these two evils. So eventually we find, if I'm robbed, I guess I'll have to deal with it. And then when you come to this, I will deal with it. And as soon as you realize that, something up there says, well, okay, he doesn't need that lesson. That's how it works, isn't it, Carina? Yes. As soon as we said, okay, lesson learned. You don't have to send him to the moon or Vietnam. He's learned his silly lesson, just terrified of his own shadow in his own house. But we do learn, all of us eventually. And then it looks as though, my simplified explanation of it is, I think that when we do come to, even for a split second of complete acceptance, it's like all the possible universes. It's like we collapse the superposition in the quantum physics and all the possibilities are opened up to us. And my Father's house, many mansions that Jesus, the quantum physicist, spoke about, all of those states of paradise are suddenly available once we've reached the complete acceptance. And then we exercise our free will. When we say, whatever. The famous guy, was it Raman or Maharshi, I think, not Ram Dass, who said, finally at the end, he said, my secret? And everyone said, what is your secret? After 30 years following, what is your secret? He said, I don't care what happens.
Yes.
But ironically, when you don't care what happens, paradise opens its doors for anyone. It says, okay, he's learned all these lessons. And Rudyard Kipling said it way back with the poem, if, then you are a man, my son, or something, but more like you're a woman. Then when you've accepted all this unacceptable, when you've accepted the cross, which is the message of Jesus, when you've accepted the totally unacceptable, bind me to the cross, strap me to the mast, Odysseus, I'll roll the stones forever, says Sisyphus. When you say I'll accept the totally acceptable, when you say that for one moment, so I said, all right, that's what he decided to become a human for. When what's his name, Gimli said, what did he say? Certainty of death, small chance of success. What are we waiting for? That resonates with every human being. And in Gallipoli, and all those glorious hero movies, we all say, nothing left to lose. We have nothing. Just go. When your bow is broken and your last arrow is spent, shoot with your whole arm. That thing. When we're all driven to that extreme eventually through no wonderful virtue. We're pushed to it. and streaming, dragging, whatever, or marching, we find ourselves there. And when we do, then, like Gimli, we suddenly realize, oh, wow, it's not certainty of death, it's certainty of immortality. And it's not small chance of success, it's 100% chance of success. Who knew? Well, you knew when you agreed to get lost in the stupid drama once more, otherwise no one would have persuaded you to go on the stupid merry-go-round one more time, right? And that's we're all the same, whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Putin or Zelensky. It's all of us, isn't it, Carina?
Yes, yes. And if we see, and I've also noticed in my life, I'll be resisting something. So of course, the minute you resist something, no matter how much, I'm trying to learn from it. Why is it happening? Why is it happening? Why is it happening? There's always that resistance. And of course, then the universe and people around you just show you that resistance all the time, or that person, whoever you're resisting with or whatever, dancing with. The minute you say, you know what, it's enough, I don't want this anymore, I've had enough, I accept it, I'm walking away, then suddenly it's like you'll get the call and everything's fine. It's like, what? Why? Why do I put myself through this torture? Why do we do that as humans? Put ourselves through torture that we really don't have to put ourselves through. It's this inherent ideal that we've been taught for centuries and centuries. So we're looking at intergenerational curses, for the want of a better word, of, you know what, you're not good enough. You know what, you should sacrifice. You must sacrifice for everything. You must fight for what you want. You must, and it's like, no, it's acceptance. Look at it, accept it for what it is. If you can change it, right, but otherwise just accept it with love, right? And see how it just changes and shifts right in front of your eyes.
Easily said, not easily done, right?
Yes, yeah, of course. It's because there's those triggers all the time. So it's simple things that trigger you all the time along the way, and they're great because it's great learning, right? And it helps you become aware, and it helps you grow within yourself, but sometimes it's like, oh, come on. Just take a step back and accept it for what it is.
Sometimes we're absolutely stuck in a situation, and we really do have to suck it up, though. There is no good option. It seems, unless it's a real nuclear option. I was labouring in the fields yesterday, literally. And it was so painful. Theoretically, I could down tools and just lose the half a day's pay and go home and have a rest, but that's not going to happen. So I thought, okay, I'll phone up the lunatic asylum that I was held in for 82 days, because when I said I'd been in heaven, everyone in Ireland thought I was mad, because you can't go to heaven unless you're dead, right? So I was thrown into a lunatic asylum for 82 days. But I phoned these people up, my erstwhile captors. They're wonderful nurses. That most of them. None of them now, were, except one maybe, was there in my day 15 years ago. But so I phoned up one of them, a lady on night duty, Jer was her name. And I said, Jer, when you're absolutely exhausted on night duty, they're a 12-hour shift, and you have no option, and the HSE, the health service, doesn't allow you guys to have a power nap, and it's great wisdom. What do you do? She said, what? I said, when you find yourself at 3:30 in the morning, you're absolutely exhausted, night, you're worth nothing, can't get overcome with sleepiness and exhaustion, and you can't have a power nap because the other nurses would. What do you do? She said, I just pace up and down the corridor. She said, I thought, oh, you're one of us. What can you do? What's you going to say? I protest, I'm sick, I go home. You know it'll pass. There's no really good option, but something says you'll get through it, and something says you can chicken out, but the lesson will probably come back for you, you know. But until finally you totally say, I accept the unacceptable, whatever, for now. But eventually, I suppose, that same juror might one day say, you know, HSE, Health Service Executive, it's totally inhuman to expect nurses to function for 12 hours in the middle of the night. And if they knew they could go to a room for even 10 minutes, not just be drinking coffee, for 10 minutes to close their eyes, set an alarm for 10 minutes, just knowing that might make the entire night shift feel like a totally different thing, guys.
Yes. Yes. So it's again about speaking to each other as well, and collaborating, and having compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So having compassion for the situation. Okay, so whereas, okay, I have to go through this. Like I had to, you were stuck in the mental asylum for whatever, that might not be the correct term. So sorry, but for 50, for whatever time you were, you had no choice, right? You had to just either fight it and make yourself miserable, or accept it and hope that you could get through the system. Because if you accept something, it's your mind relaxes almost, and it's more creative. Whereas if you're fighting, you're anxious, you're fighting, and nothing's working, and nothing happens. And I mean, I can't speak for you, but I can speak about my time in when I was in detention. It was like, am I going to fight, or am I going to just accept the situation as it is and make the most of it and just move through it, because there's nothing else I can do? So, and I mean, a lot of times that's all you can do. But how about you? What was your experience with that? When you were in the mental psychiatric hospital.
In a sense, it certainly wasn't. I was so incredibly heavily drugged. They just kept on upping and upping and upping and upping and upping and upping it, I think. And I honestly believe it sounds incredibly paranoid. They're wonderful doctors and nurses. They're doing their best. But I believe there was one lady who was actually falsifying the blood tests, because as soon as a nice African doctor came on and looked at the blood, everything suddenly changed. I think she was under a whole lot of pressure to keep me there, and I think she was pretending that my levels of valproate or whatever hadn't got to therapeutic level, because they were bumping it up, and still theoretically the blood wasn't coming up to therapeutic level. So I was a severely drugged Tom Kelly was it there. But at the second tribunal, Carina, the first one after I was taken on the 20th of December 2008, the year that I'd had. I've been trying to tell my family about my experience for 7 months, and they totally didn't get it. And nobody did, really. And I've been trying to blow a whistle on a government TB eradication scheme, and that was going very badly. And so I was locked up, which was a huge relief to a lot of people, I would say, and silenced. Locked up on the 20th of December. On the 6th of January, birthday perhaps of Joan of Arc, and Feast of the Epiphany, I was heading up the stairs to my first tribunal, so-called tribunal, heavily drugged. Some people are drugged before that. They can't even walk. They're so heavily sedated. Wow. And they're meant to prove to the tribunal that they're not meant to be there. And I think, well, of course they're sedated. So I'm going up the stairs, and there's a wonderful nurse, John Keller, someday he'll be watching this beside me, and Jenny O'Connor, a student nurse. And he says, "Tommy, bye, would you like some advice?" he said, in his Cork accent. "Sure, John," I said. He said, "Whatever you do," excuse my language, he said, "just leave God fucking out of it for fuck's sake," or for God's sake, he said. "Just leave God out of it," he said, because he knew I was all about God. And I said, "Thanks, John." So when I got to the tribunal, I let them have it all about God, of course. And coming down the steps again, I turned to John and I said, "I blew it, John, didn't I?" So, "You fucking blew it. All right, Tommy boy," he said. It was very good. So they didn't want to hear about God, because if there was a God and I was right, they'd all be wrong. So weeks later, there's another tribunal on the 26th of January, Kelly Lane, my wife's birthday, God bless her, and she was praying for me. And I let them have it again that time. The Irish psychiatrist in the tribunal leaned across and said, "Mr. Kelly, you think you have a mission, is that right?" And I said, "Well, doctor," I was beginning to get the system. I said, "Heavily, but it's a little bit of somebody was praying for me." I said, "Well, doctor, I kind of like to believe that everybody has a mission, and that especially professionals, when they choose their particular profession, it's because they feel they have a unique gift to give." And she I thought, maybe I'm out of here now. And I thought it went fairly well. I'm going back down the stairs. And this peace came over me, because I knew I'd given my best. And the peace said, "Tom, if they renew your order for 6 weeks, or 6 months, or 6 years, or 60 years of the rest of your national life, that's cool, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah, I'm cool with that." So in that moment, I felt I'd given the tribunal all I had to give. I'd done all I meant to do, and if they locked me up forever, that was okay. And the extraordinary thing is that my wife-to-be, Kelly, my fiancée, and 3 children were in the States, and they were in a bad way. And Kelly was being tortured daily. She'd phone up that establishment 3 times a day and be told that I was in therapy, which I wasn't. And call back, he's in therapy. And she'd call back 3 times a day and they wouldn't let her speak to me. She was in agonies and agonies and agonies beyond anything I can even begin to imagine. But I was so drugged and so up my own rectum anyway, and such an ASSHOLE by nature, that didn't even impinge on my consciousness. It was all about me and my mission. But at least when I made peace that I was going to be there for 60 years or whatever it took, I was cool with that. As soon as I accepted that in my drugged state, the very next day they said, you're going back to the other ward and then you'll be out the door, kind of. So sure enough, full attention, full acceptance, and whew, you're out.
Wow.
Okay. What I think, Carina, is that I know God is smart, but I don't think God is so smart that he could arrange one single world so that everything works out. You know, I think that that God just rips off a brand new universe for each of our thoughts. I think that's how it happens. You know, so I think there may be lots of Tom Kellys in those other universes which I'm unaware of, who've had different thoughts, who've had different fears given them. They may all be out there, and I'm not responsible for them. But if I think more accepting, more loving, more inclusive thoughts, then I will probably access ever more inclusive universes. And whether they're infinite parallel universes, or whether it's just one, or whether they're various frequencies, it doesn't really matter, because effectively it comes to the same thing, doesn't it? Whether I'm actually saving one universe or whether I'm saving an infinitude universe like everybody else, it doesn't really matter, does it? At the end of the day, it's the same experience.
I guess what I was saying is, would you, again, it's about the choices we make. So with you accepting that having that peace and saying, you know what, it's okay, whatever happens, even if I'm here for the rest of my life, I'm okay with it. With you accepting that, it's almost like you changed the trajectory at that point of your life, because it was like, okay, I accepted the lessons learned, thank you. And then the door was opened. So it's about choice on some level, but it's really about, that's what I'm just seeing, you know, but it's also about just feeling it. It's almost like a message within your body that it's like, okay, this is fine. Because if you said it mentally, oh, you know what, I accept this, it's different to when you say, you know what, it's okay, I accept this. Whereas it's inside your body. So that would make the difference with the outcome. What do you think?
In general, yes, but I was so drugged that I was deeply, 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 deeply demented. And when they let me out after I did 2 days on the 12th of March, Independence Day in Mauritius, as my very, very, very kind nurse, Robert Kander Singh, shared with me. Robert Kander Singh very graciously accepted a copy of The Power of Now, and we stayed in touch afterwards when he left the HSE. When they let me out on the 12th of March, I was like a deeply demented man. I felt like 105 years of age. And I had to fly to California, and I had to transfer in New York, in either LaGuardia or JFK, I think, JFK. And I knew that transfer was going to be all I could possibly do. And when they told me that I'd have to change my baggage as well, that I thought, this I can't do. I'm 105. And I tried to phone Kelly from there. I couldn't use the phone. I was so incredibly demented by the drugs, and of course by an abrupt attempt at withdrawal, that I could barely function. When I got to California, I couldn't figure out how all these people, even old people, knew that the wide roads, that they went this way and not that way. And I thought, when they come to these big intersections, how do they not get totally turned around? How do they know where to go? I was so demented from those foul drugs. They are neurotoxins. And Mandela spent 27 years breaking rocks, you know. When I came here, my poor brains, there was no possibility of taking out a veterinary license or ever being a vet again. My brains were SHIT, and they still are. But I'm getting there. But in the menial jobs I've had to do since out in the heat, and I've suffered a lot physically, I kept thinking of Mandela. 27 years. Was he studying in Harvard for 27 years to become South African president? No. He was having his ego and his pride and his psyche molded by the experience that he had. And we all do. And if I'm out here weed whacking for 8 hours in the heat, that must be exactly what Tom Kelly needs. So even when you can know that you need something and not believe it. I used to think you can believe and not know, but you can know, and still not believe it. And so I couldn't let this podcast go without saying that while the everyone is always doing their best. And the nurses are incredible people, just like me, doing their best and doing night shift and sleep deprived. And the doctors get into psychiatry and medicine because they want to help. And big pharma people aren't incredible evil tycoons. Even the opioid epidemic, people are trying to earn money for their families. But what those drugs do to human brains, when you throw one little spanner into a wheel, when you throw one little serotonin reuptake inhibitor or valproate mood stabilizer or quetiapine fumarate or the benzos, you throw that into something as the most complex thing we know of existing in the cosmos. You throw one of those little pieces of sand in there and we say, oh, look, cool, a camera. Really? Do you have any idea what you're messing with? Holy cow. And do you have any idea, doctors and nurses, that if you would just sit down with a person like Carina instead and listen to them, which not one person did except maybe Dr. Suleiman from Nigeria, I think. If you would just sit down and listen to the person, when they're undrugged especially, they could say all the words they need to heal themselves. If the poor doctors only knew that. God, Carina. Oh my goodness. And they will do this very soon.
Yes.
I'm sure they will.
Yes.
They will.
That's
look
why
at look at Howard Schubin and the message he's getting out there. All you have to do is listen to them lovingly and people can heal themselves.
Yes. Yes. But we need to change the narrative out there in society. And people have to accept that or try it out at least. I mean, with neuroscience and everything, you can do anything. You can heal your body. And you get through things. You get through life and you get through pain if you decide that you can, and you can. But you've got to allow yourself to see it and to realize that you can, right? Because if you don't open your mind to it, you can't see it.
And you know how you get through all this stuff? You know what modern science tells us? Because of oxytocin, or serotonin, or dopamine, or DMT, or the endocannabinoid system, or the endorphins. How simply, and we believe that bullshit. Holy cow! Holy cow!
I know.
All we do is get the right amount of oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, and we'll be cool, and then we can live out productive lives and get a bigger mortgage, and that'll work. Yeah, the Ciroc said Prozac, that'll work. We believe that bullshit, like we believe we were all sinners long ago. We're so gullible. The emperor has no clothes, and eventually some child says, I can see his testicles. And then
Yes.
I don't see his clothes either. He never had any clothes. He never had any clothes. We were joking there about Jesus before. Jesus, bless his heart. He tried so hard and nobody understood him except maybe come to him. And at the end, he's obviously so burnt out and he's probably got all kinds of tropical diseases going on. And he's burnt out to bits. The poor guy, and he's picking fights with everybody. And he commits suicide by cop with the help of Judas, who he probably says, Judas, if I won't turn myself in, will you? And I said, whatever. And he asked these guys who've been parading around for 3 years with the Savior of the earth to stay awake and not sleep and pray for him. Why would the Savior of the earth need anyone to pray for him, let alone these three bozos who've 3 years haven't got the message and they can't do it. The poor, and he's sweating. I believe Jesus sweated blood the night before, all night. I haven't the courage to do that. It was like going into Gettysburg, only worse. The next day I'm going to be up on the cross for 6 hours trying to smile at my mom and not to curse and swear. And so on myself. Ooh, I don't know if I can do. The poor man. My heart goes out to him what he did. But can't we see that he was just like us and that every single one of us is immortal? I used to teach food safety, and a woman came in, a Mexican lady, and she drank and lost her husband, lost her 3 kids, lost everything, finally lost her health, got E. coli, went into a coma, came out well. I said, wow, what a story. I said, 10 years, and she finally got her kids back, and her mom saved her. And I said, whatever her name was, maybe Maria. I said, Maria, if you were given a choice between living that 10 years again or hanging 6 hours on a cross, no, quite. Give me the 6 hours on the cross. How many people? I knew a guy, Gilbert man in Ireland. He was 3 or 4 days in the water somewhere. The sharks were eating there'd been a gangplank between his cruise liner where he was a steward and some other one, and they pulled apart and not knows these guys fell in the water. His co-workers were slowly devoured by the sharks. 3 days in the water before he was rescued. I mean, what PTSD do you have after that? 6 hours on the cross or 3 days in the water waiting for the sharks to get you? I mean, these guys who go down in friendly fire helicopter and say he gave his life for his country, say, well, not deliberately. Most of us don't hang on a cross deliberately. But as soon as we sign up for human vulnerability, it's a question of certainty of death, incredible vulnerability. Any moment someone could say, police on the line, was your daughter so-and-so just been killed in a car? You know what it is to be human, Carina. In infinite vulnerability. Jesus, all of us. Infinite vulnerability. Every one of us. We're all Jesus walking around. Who isn't? That's what he tried to tell us. And we didn't understand, did we? And the greatest, the most evil drug baron or pharmaceutical manipulator or politician, they're all Jesus. Just doing their best, aren't they? Trying to find their way home.
Yes. Trying to find their way home. And then again, home is a relative term as well, right? So, or is it the same as saying, we were also saying about wherever you go, you take yourself with you. So maybe that's home too. Wow, this conversation went right very deep, and so, Tom, do you have anything else to say before we end the show?
When I came down after those first two experiences, I kind of levitated down. And I thought it would be very cool to be able to levitate. I think there was a guy up in Valley Center here near me in California called Bhimananda. He was a very humble monk. And apparently in the refectory some days he'd be walking towards the table, he'd suddenly float over it, And he'd be very embarrassed. He couldn't stop levitating. And some of the older monks who were very intellectual and learned were jealous of him because he wasn't so learned, I totally believe he could levitate, because I met a lady who said she met him coming out of a temple up there in LA or San Francisco. She bumped into him accidentally and apologized. And she said for 4 days she was in a state of bliss after just bumping into this guy. So I'm sure he could. I've no doubt he could levitate. But so I was thinking, it would be really cool. Everyone would be so impressed, But if you had a choice between being able to levitate and being able to levitate in the sense of cause levity or raise your own, find your sense, you crack yourself up at will, which would be a more important superpower. So, but anyway, when I levitated downstairs after the first two experiences, I went to the computer and I went to thank a lady called Catherine McCourt for putting me onto Eckhart Tolle. And I said, Catherine, I've just experienced the peace that passes all understanding. And I sent that to her. And then I sat in my laptop and something said silently, why don't you Google blind? And I thought, what? Who are you? I knew it was in a sense. As a veterinarian, sometimes I'd be signing these export certs for salmonella-free meat to Sweden or something, and you'd sign your name and you'd date stamp and you'd block capitals and you'd turn the next one. And then one day this voice said, you need to go back 17, you missed a date stamp. And I said, who the hell are you? And I said, well, you need to go back 17. And I went, that kind of thing, the thing that wakens you up 5 minutes before you need to wake up, the thing that makes you scratch your head in bed or pull up the blanket, it's just this other thing. But this thing anyway, this thing said, Google blind. I said, what? Who are you? And I said, well, such weirdness has happened to me now. I'm not going to argue. I'll just Google blind. So I closed my eyes and I hit about 13 keys and pressed word enter. It was a string of consonants and it said, no word match. And I said, well, that didn't work. And the thing said, buy a ticket. I said, what? I'm not a great one for buying tickets, but I should. You need to overtip and you need to buy tickets. But I said, I said, 13 was pushing, but oh yeah, I guess it was 3. Okay, 3. So this is a conversation myself. That's schizophrenia. Right? So okay, 3. Close my eyes again. I hit 3 keys, Carina, and I look and it says comma XN. And I just knew it'll be on the first page, the first 10 hits. So the very first one said, symbol of the early Christian church. And I said, that's good. No, sorry. The very first one said, it was an ad for an life insurance company. It said, peace of mind worldwide, high net worth individuals, international assignees, financial assurance, something like this and all that. Oh yeah, that's it. That's it, peace of mind. That's my motto. That's my mission now, spread peace of mind worldwide. Peace of mind. Oh yeah, so my mom used to say peace of mind is worth any chore, but there's no such thing as peace of mind. There's only peace from mind, I didn't know that. All mistakes. Anyway, but the fourth one said symbol of the early Christian church. So the early Christians were cool. Maybe they got it, before the Council of Nicaea 326 AD, and the Emperor Constantine got in and corrupted the whole thing. But the early Christians knew we're all immortal. I think most of them, the martyrs, Vibia Perpetua, and those women martyrs. The seventh one said it was symbol of, I think I told you this before, international symbol for toxic substances. I didn't realize I was going to be poisoned with a whole lot of toxic substances. And the ninth one, I think, said it was about probability equations. My brother Connor and I argued that I said there's no randomness or else everything is. And he said, oh, there is. It's a question of probabilities, but it's, to me, anyway. But later I realized that XN is also pronounced ZEN, Zen. And I thought it was comma, Zen. You've had all this 49 years of trouble, and now you're going to rest in Zen, I thought. But in fact, it was, you're entering the comma. You're entering a whole lot of turbulence, and after that will be the Zen. So right from the moments of enlightenment was right back into crashing misunderstandings and errors and mistakes again. But they were, now I understand, they were divine. It wasn't that my mom was about to die. She actually died, if she do die, 7 years and 7 days later on the 23rd of May, 2015, as it happened. And something made me calculate. But when I got this comma XN thing, I was excited. I realized this isn't for me. This is for the world to prove that Tom Kelly is authentic. These are my stigmata. This is me legit. See this? A miracle, comma XN. And nobody really got that or wanted to, except one beautiful young doctor from Africa called Dr. Suleiman, and maybe his buddy, Dr. Stella, both, I think, from Nigeria, who struggled mightily against all the tide and the currents and everything to get me out of those psych institutions, and who did, and to whom I'm eternally grateful. And I hope to dedicate the first book to both of them, as well as to my wife Kelly and family. So that was just one of this kind of, people come back with some special information. That was all I had, was the comma XN, but it was powerful enough for me. Peace of mind worldwide. The funny thing is, a few weeks later, by the way, when I tried very unsuccessfully to get on RT in Ireland, BBC, ABC, NBC, whatever. So I tried to go public in here with, there is actually a God. Tom Kelly says so. It's official. Somebody came along and said, Tom, how are you getting on with this, spreading this peace of mind worldwide? And I said, not very well, as you bloody well know. Because I said, I don't know, maybe a little bit. One of my nephew in Cork, Alexei Vandenberg, maybe an odd person here, maybe one. And so, you're not cool with that? I said, no. Why not? I said, how can I possibly save the world when they're being born faster than I can save them, This will take me forever, longer than forever. And whatever it said, did you have any better plans for longer than forever, Tom? I said, resting in peace at the right hand of Christ in heaven, with my enemies as a footstool, and sitting on the throne being fed grapes. I guess not, no. I said, well, have that, Tom. So that's it. That's too much said. That's enough said. Thank you, Carina. That was it.
Thank you, Tom. This has been great. I love this, and great conversation as usual. So thank you, everybody. I'm sure you've enjoyed this just as much as I have. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and we'll see you all soon. Bye.